Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mile High Sports Today. I'm your host, Sean Drotar. With me today is Doug Ottewill, the editor-in-chief of Mile High Sports Magazine. You see a lot of those behind us here. It's where it all started. So good to have Doug in. Doug, thanks for joining me today. But one of the reasons we want to talk about it, the Broncos, I think, are a somewhat surprising 2-2, at least probably surprising in the way they got there. But you wrote an interesting piece about it. We've talked a little bit about it as well. The idea that, at least thus far, he's the most impressive coach on the Broncos is not Sean Payton. Maybe, in fact, the most important Bronco, player or otherwise, might be their defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very unlikely storyline, especially considering all the things that led up to this. I mean, essentially, Vance Joseph getting hired, much to the chagrin of everyone, because they wanted Kyle Shanahan, I believe, at the time. And then
that would have been a
flopping.
better hire, obviously.
Absolutely.
But what are you going to do?
But, and then, as time goes by, you kind of hear bits and pieces of, well, he didn't have any authority to do anything. It was really John Elway making the calls. And then, kind of going from there to be the DC in Arizona, where, quite frankly, he just wasn't that good. I mean, what did he led the 29th best defense,
29th
defense when he was hired by Sean Payton. Everybody's going, what are we doing here? But you got to give the guy a lot of credit, because that is the only thing that's keeping this team together. Is their defense has been so good that it's given Bo Nix and Sean Payton a lot of wiggle room to make mistakes and grow and do whatever the offense is or isn't doing.
Yeah, a lot of cover in a lot of ways too, for some things that we'd be talking about that are really, really ugly. I mean, the offensive game was ugly. The Broncos' performance from Nix, 60 yards, the lowest of any quarterback in a winning game for 20 or more attempts is 2007, which I was surprised it was that frequent. But Rodgers in this game, he hadn't been sacked 5 times in 40 different starts, and gets sacked 5 times, hit another 14. They have really gone after them. They've been really, really aggressive. Both Nick Benito talked about the play call at the end of the game where PJ Locke got the sack and said that as soon as it came in, he knew it was going to work. Justin Sternad, who had the sack on the first play of the game, his first defensive snap in 4 years, he goes out and gets the sack, but talked about how Joseph had prepared them immaculately for the game. The Broncos have really, really good numbers in the early going defensively. So obviously that's impressive. Some of it has to do with the fact, yes, you have faced obviously Justin Fields, but the more that goes in the rearview mirror, we saw Geno Smith perform well. We saw Geno Smith perform well last night in a loss to the Lions, but you've also had Aaron Rodgers there. And I get it. The weather was bad, but Rodgers still came away with 240 plus yards. When you look at the way the defense has shifted, the addition of John Franklin Myers, the improvement of Zach Allen, which we probably need to talk about him a little bit, but then the main switch from this time last year, Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson, to now Brandon Jones and PJ Locke. This unit actually hasn't missed a beat. It's gotten better.
Yeah, and I think there's some interesting backstory to that, as far as I've heard, and bits and pieces of this have kind of come out, especially in the last couple of weeks, because this defense has been so good. But you're right, there are no quote unquote household names on this defense other than Patrick Surtain. But from what you're hearing is that when Vance Joseph came in here, he said, look, that 2022 defense was pretty good. So rather than taking what he did and his system and his language and instilling it into a bunch of guys who had already been playing well, he said, I'm going to do it in reverse. I'm going to do what they've been doing. I'm going to speak the language that they've been speaking. And I think that's a really interesting component to a defense as a whole, but for a coach. And we all know coaches have big egos.
I can't recall in all of the years I've covered the NFL and decades of covering the NFL, I cannot recall a coach doing that. Basically saying my own play calls, I'll scrap them because these are the same plays, but you already know it by this. So it's easier for me to do it. I cannot recall that happening once.
No. And really, if you think about it, just from a common sense standpoint, what's easier, asking one guy to learn a system that works, or asking, 11 at a minimum, really more like 20 guys to try a system that may or may not work, but it's yours. I think what he did is something that, can be applied to the rest of the team, or you hope it. And I don't know, or I shouldn't say if he's necessarily dumbed the defense down, but he's doing what they have been doing for not just his tenure as a defensive coordinator, but the one before him. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that could probably apply to the offense a little. Maybe you simplify. Maybe you go back to what Bo Nix knows, a little more than what Sean Payton knows. And I think we saw that a little bit in the Tampa game. The offense was clicking. I don't know, you know, how much you can blame the rain, how much you can blame the Jets defense, which is pretty good. But I mean, at the end of the day, what Vance Joseph's done for a defense is kind of a unique model, and I think it should be sort of taken into consideration, or at the very least talked about more, because it's working.
Yeah, we had a chance to talk about this a little bit yesterday with Troy Rank of the Denver Post, and he mentioned kind of the same thing when I brought up the fact that he kept some of Ejiro Evero's nomenclature, and now the defense is not the same. Joseph is much more aggressive going after the quarterback than Evero was. But when Troy talked about it, he said, "Yeah, he's like, there's really no way to dance around it." What Joseph is showing is a humility that too often Sean Payton lacks, and that may have something to do with the way that he connects to his players.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I was among the many who thought he should be fired, who thought he should never get hired, who thought he should get fired after the Miami game last year. I think it shows a lot of resilience, and a guy that's a student of the game to come this far in the same town and do what he's doing. And like I said, there are no household names. He just lost his middle linebacker, who really was the captain and the play caller of that defense.
Mhm.
To not skip a beat and to hold Aaron Rodgers touchdownless for the first time in his career at home, I mean, that's a commanding performance. And I think you gotta kind of do the give credit where credit is due thing. And quite frankly, the offense is got to pick it up. I mean, you're asking a lot of this defense, and they've given it.
Yeah. Second in yards allowed, 256.5 per game. Third in passing yards allowed, only 146. Third in points allowed, maybe the most important stat of everything, 13.8. Second in sacks with 16. That's impressive, given the fact, again, no household names. More impressive, 10 different players are on that ledger for those 16 sacks. 10. That's remarkable. And the idea that the Broncos might be able to get pressure in waves and do this by committee, I think there was a lot of question about that, because you do have guys in Jonathan Cooper and Nick Benito. Baron Browning is hurt right now. Jonah Ellis is a rookie. Zach Allen has had a career in which I think his sack totals have appeared underwhelming, given his ability. Nobody on this team has ever been like a double-digit sack guy, ever. And here they come, looking like a group that can still find a way to get it done in clumps and in groups. That's pretty fascinating. Whether it's sustainable or not, I don't know. But obviously, the kind of pressure that Joseph is bringing is wreaking havoc on opposing quarterbacks. There are worse guys, than Aaron Rodgers. Baker Mayfield, who is not a bad quarterback,
been pretty good this year. Yeah,
looks pretty good on Sunday again, but looked like as bad as he's ever looked against the Broncos, because when Joseph has brought the heat, and I think the point you're making is really interesting, Doug, the student of the game part. In the last couple of games, he's really adjusted and adapted. When Mayfield did not react well, in fact, reacted unusually poorly to the pressure. Mayfield is like all quarterbacks; none of them react great to pressure. But Mayfield's not a guy that tends to crumble. He's a pretty, energetic guy, and he just is a rah-rah type, and he goes out and doesn't get flustered by it. Usually, he was clearly flustered. So what did Joseph do? Play by play. Okay, we might have planned this for the quarter, but crumple that up. This is working. Bring more heat until he can stop it. He couldn't stop it. Same thing for Aaron Rodgers. And it's one thing to have a good game plan. It's another to adjust and adapt on a quarter by quarter, drive by drive, play by play basis. And you're seeing that from Vance Joseph, which is really amazing, and in kind of sharp contrast from his much more renowned head coach. And you alluded to that with offense in Sean Payton, who basically has still said, well, I call what I call. I planned what I planned this week. That's what we're doing. A couple weeks ago, when Tyler Bidet was going really well on his carries, they asked, how come he didn't get him more? He said, well, we had packages, but the field position didn't come up.
Right.
Well, you're the play caller. You're that coach. You can put him in whenever you want and call whatever play you want when you want. Peyton acts like that's something that you just can't do.
Yeah.
And here is Vance Joseph going, wow, Baker Mayfield looked a little wobbly there. Blitz him again.
Yeah. Well, I think you make a great point with it. 10 guys on the sack list. To me, that's an indication of a really good scheme that goes back to a really good film study because you see things you like and you game plan accordingly. And then, like you said, the third step of making adjustments. If you see something on Sunday that's working or not working, you change it.
Sure.
And I think that when you've got, if you've got a Crosby or one of the Von Miller, if you've got one of those guys, of course they're going to get theirs when it comes to numbers. If you don't, and I'm not taking away anything from the Broncos, front seven, but if you don't have a name guy that's going to beat his guy one-on-one on any given play, you've got to be creative as a coach. And I think that's what we've seen. And that's why, you mentioned the PJ Locke sack to close out the game. That's a great call.
Think about that play.
That's seeing something that you're like, hey, well, you know what? We're going to say this when it matters the most. And he did.
And it's not that blitz wasn't delayed.
No.
Locke came all the way up and was standing on the line of scrimmage. They just basically bet that Breece Hall would make the wrong read, which he did. He protected inside. Locke came streaking from the outside, unblocked, and was able to get Rodgers. But that's another thing where you've sort of realized your opponents were like, hey, we're going to bet that Breece Hall won't pick this up.
Right.
And we're not going to even bother disguising it. We're going to line him up there and make Hall make a decision, and he made the wrong one. And that's a bit of a gamble. It's Aaron Rodgers. You're pulling a safety all the way up to the line of scrimmage, and he doesn't get there. Someone is going to be available, and Rodgers will probably find him. But that's also showing a lot of faith and confidence in your guys, which is really fascinating too.
I liken it to, we're on the precipice of postseason baseball. It's kind of like the Royals that won in
2015.
15. They were notorious for making the defense make the play or make a mistake.
Put the ball in play, and
they would put pressure every time the ball was in play. They would take the extra base, and it worked. And I think that's a little bit of maybe not an exact apples to apples analogy, but that's what Vance Joseph's doing right now. He's saying, hey, look, we're going to blitz you, and you need to be the one to figure it out. Pick it up, hit the guy that's open, go over the top, whatever you want to do defense, but you haven't seen this look. We're going to put pressure on you guys to make the play, and it's worked.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see because now, especially the way that it's gone in the NFL, the idea is now you kind of back your defense off, the Vic Fangio style, you don't show anything, so you're trying to keep from getting beat over the top. But Joseph's almost going to a Back to the Future style, a little more Wade Phillips, see ball, get ball. Let's take it to them and see if they can adjust and adapt. But I think for a couple of years now in the league, with quarterbacks getting used to teams sitting back and accepting the fact we'll surrender the under route, so we just won't let anything big go over the top. A lot of guys aren't used to seeing this kind of pressure again, and it seems to work. So there's a lot of creativity there and a lot to like. It is Raiders week. The Broncos will get going at it. Of course, this week with a tremendous opportunity in front of them, they'll have the Raiders and then the Chargers. All three of those teams 2-2. The Broncos, with a good couple of weeks, could actually put themselves in an interesting position in the AFC West. You hear me get to talk about the Denver Athletic Club all the time, but with you here, Doug, of course, you're a member, a longtime member of the DAC. What makes it so special? Why do you enjoy being a member?
Well, it's like my second home. I'm surprised they don't kick me out sometimes.
That's what Anilo Piro basically said too.
Yeah. It's to say that it's a great gym is a gross understatement. They've got a little bit of everything. I mean, get your meals there. They've got a great new facility that, kind of allows the professional to do his job in between workouts or vice versa. Do your workouts in between your job. And it's just, everything there is very well thought out. I mean, if it's internet, it's more than that. It's offices, it's conference rooms. But yeah, they've got a little bit of everything. Golf simulator, one of the best gyms in all of Denver, in my opinion. So yeah, I spend a little too much time there, I would say, but it's productive time.
Well, hey, that's the point of it, obviously. Check out DenverAthleticClub.cc for more details. See what you can do to join the DAC, because that club has a club for your entire life. We have you here today. Of course, you have your Denver Stiff shirt on. The Denver Nuggets lose one of their all-time greats. Really, the NBA does, when Dikembe Mutombo passes away yesterday from brain cancer at the age of 58, drafted 4th overall in 1991 by the Nuggets. Played his first 5 years, almost certainly, I think, for any Nuggets fans, and Doug, you and I go back that way for a while. Should have played a lot more of those years in Denver. Things did not go that way, but obviously a monumental loss for the Nuggets community. Before we get into really what he meant for basketball, just for the Nuggets, and you think back to that run against George Karl's Sonics, and it felt to me when Mutombo arrived on the scene that they had a league-wide superstar that they had not had, and maybe ever. Alex English is a Hall of Famer, easy Hall of Famer, should have been, but always a guy like forever underrated. You will win a lot. If you ever go and you want to win a bet at the bar with your buddies, ask people who the leading scorer in the NBA in the 1980s was. You'll get a lot of answers. You won't get Alex English. That's actually the correct answer.
Yep.
But English never really burst onto the scene nationally. Teams that you were never hearing, the big networks of the time talk about, the Denver Nuggets have Alex English. If you haven't seen him, you got to tune in. But Mutombo was something different, and it felt like that the Nuggets, in some regard, had arrived on the NBA scene in a way I hadn't seen when Mutombo started to cement himself.
Yeah, and I remember when he came to the Nuggets, and I remember watching him at Georgetown thinking, man, this guy's kind of a freak. I mean, he's just big and long.
Alongside
and
Alonzo Mourning. How'd you like that?
What a front.
Oh, my goodness.
But I remember, and this goes to my own sort of immaturity as a basketball fan. I remember being like, oh, man, he can't play offense. He's not that good on the block. Like, he just looks awkward when he gets the ball. But it didn't take long to watch him and see how exactly he could impact a game if he never touched the ball on offense. I mean, he was such a force in the middle. And you go back to that Seattle series. I mean, they had a lot of guys who like to get to the rim, and they just couldn't. I mean, he was there. What did he have? 8 blocks in that game-winning series.
Yeah, the clincher. Yeah,
and I mean, that's now every. And you kind of got to go back a ways. Every team has 2 7-footers now, and every team has their version of, Rudy Gay is maybe the one guy that you can think of as like a true defensive, just stuck in the middle. No one's getting there.
Yeah,
but Mutombo,
Rudy Gobert, the big
Gobert. Sorry, not Gay.
The last man standing over in Minnesota now.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for the correction there. I mean, but that's how impactful he was. I mean, he could anchor that block and no one was getting to the rim. He's the original rim protector. And he was here and we got to see it. And you're right. It's too bad he didn't play his entire career here, but when he was here, boy, what a difference maker he was.
Yeah. There've been, of course, it's so recent as of yesterday, but there are a lot of thoughts about Mutombo, but a lot of the really intelligent longtime basketball writers have looked at it and said, was he the best pure defensive player in the history of the NBA? 4-time defensive player of the year. That's tied for the most all time. Of course, he's a Hall of Famer, made the All-Star team 8 times, 6-time all defense, 3-time all NBA. And we're talking about a guy that basically had no offensive game except to, grab the garbage and
he got
dunk it
better
back in.
toward the end of
a
his
little
career,
bit better.
But yeah, he wasn't a guy that was a go-to.
No,
in the
no, you never ran your offense through him. Block shots champion 3 times, second all time in shot blocks in history, rebounding champion twice. So there's no question that his ability as a defensive player and for the Nuggets to have that sort of defensive identity for that fun team, it all kind of fell apart in a lot of different ways. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf's situation, Alfonso Ellis's microfracture surgery, these kind of things doomed that Nuggets team. But Robert Pack coming off the bench, you had such an entertaining, fun team. Then Brian Williams, Bryson Daly, playing alongside Mutombo. That still feels like a Nuggets. A great Nuggets team that maybe never got to be there.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most Nuggets of all Nuggets tales. I mean, they literally had a team that I think if you'd given that core 2 years, 3 years, they could have ascended to the finals. I mean, it was that good.
I think so too.
And they had all the right roles. I mean, you talk about Mutombo being this defensive stopper, but they had the right guys on the outside. They had guys that understood their role, whether it was to be the secondary scorer or the primary scorer, and just the way that it unfolded and how quickly it unfolded. I mean, Ellis gets hurt in the offseason.
Right.
Mutombo can't get his contract done. I mean, Mahmoud kind of goes off the deep end, and you know, I don't want to say he was blackballed, but it was just
He was blackballed.
unceremonious departure. I mean, there was just, it was one of the best teams the Nuggets have ever had.
And people forget they lost that next round to Utah in Game 7.
Yeah, I mean, they could have been the
Yeah.
team, the only team to not only win a series, you know, as they did against the Sonics, but they could have done the next against the Jazz too in the next round. I mean, they were just they were better than people thought. They had all the parts and pieces, and they were young.
Boy, were they young.
And it fell apart in the blink of an eye.
The most veteran guy on that team was Reggie Williams, and he was in his 6th season. No one else was in more than 4.
Your knockdown shooter right there.
And that was Tom Hammonds.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a young team. It just never came together. But Mutombo's legacy is so fascinating because the first ever global ambassador for the NBA, won the Walter Kennedy Citizenship Award, not once but twice. The only person who's ever done it. We talked about some of it yesterday. Mutombo spoke 9 languages. He spoke English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, 5 different Central African dialects. Went to Georgetown to be a doctor, walked away with 2 different degrees, was an intern for the United States Congress and the World Bank. We're talking about the also scholar and a gentleman, along with being a Hall of Fame basketball player. And so I think that's why sort of the loss hits so hard for basketball fans, not even in Denver, but around the country and even around the world.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned his intelligence and kind of his intent to really make basketball a global thing. I kind of go back to, and I think everybody has heard those stories. I mean, really the best thing that I've read today is Andrew Feinstein, who does write for Denver Stiffs. He's founded Denver Stiffs. He got to spend a lot of time with him, and he really has a sense as to how much Dikembe Mutombo meant on the global stage. I go back to when you and I were in high school.
Right.
And about that time, that's about when our friends could be ball boys for the Denver Nuggets. And I had several friends that were ball boys.
Oh, wow.
Every one of them said, this dude is the nicest. You know, he's the guy that tips the ball boys. He's the guy that gives shoes at the end of the game. And he was just good to people. And I think when you can take that on a micro scale of, you know, dealing with one 16-year-old kid, that ultimately will mean nothing to you in your life. You know, that says a lot about person who can treat someone that way when they quote unquote don't matter. And then when he takes it to the entire global stage and does that same thing on a huge platform, I think that's why he was so successful. And that's why the game has grown so much. I mean, obviously no one person gets credit for the globalization of basketball, but he's right up there.
I suggested yesterday that I thought that the NBA should start a new award, the Dikembe Mutombo Award, at the end of the season for the best internationally born player in the NBA that year. I think it's a fitting thing. The NBA's footprint in Africa simply does not exist without Mutombo's efforts. His ability to communicate the game of basketball in multiple languages matters an awful lot when you're traveling the globe, spreading the word of basketball. This is a guy who his 2 degrees are in linguistics and diplomacy. I mean, you're not going to find a lot of NBA players who can do that. So, I mean, you're really talking about one of a kind. And yeah, you're right to bring that up. If you haven't had a chance, go to denverstiffs.com, read Andrew Feinstein's story because, you know, he actually had the opportunity even to talk about the situation in Africa with Mutombo, because Andrew's had the ability to spend a lot of time with him. It's probably the best thing you'll read about it. But obviously a major loss for the global basketball community at large. And that big smile is not going to be replaced, because you're right. One of the things I always think about with Mutombo, and not only his legacy that we all know about, but the little things you talked about, ball boys and everything. When we talk about people who are kind, what we're really talking about is people who do nice things for people who can't do anything for them. Right. It's not transactional. There's nothing that you can do that's going to make a difference. You can say something really nice to that person who might get you back with whatever. That's different. But for someone who isn't going to do anything for you and probably never do anything for you, that's really kindness. And that's one of the things that Mutombo, more than anything, probably that's the legacy. And that's a phenomenal legacy to have. His Denver Nuggets now in part. We've talked about that. Now playing in Abu Dhabi starting in Friday and Sunday. They will play in Abu Dhabi over in the United Arab Emirates against the Boston Celtics, the last two champs going at it in preseason basketball games. And so don't get too excited about it, everybody. They are the first two preseason games. But again, showing the footprint the NBA has and now the footprint the Nuggets have on the global stage.
Yeah. And you know, you think about the dream team and what that meant to basketball in terms of making it popular across the globe. But I think you go back to a guy like Dikembe, he made it accessible. It's one thing to make something
That's a good point.
popular. It's an entirely different one to make it accessible. And the amount of work that he put in Africa and the money and the time and the thought that went into, hey, we're going to build these academies, we're going to have these camps, we're going to improve facilities. I mean, this stuff doesn't happen unless somebody is actively doing it. And I think,
Right.
you know, to your point of kindness, you don't have to do that. He didn't make money doing that.
Look at
He
today's
did it
NBA.
because he wanted to do it.
Who are the best players in the NBA? Just roll them off the top of our head, right? Jokic,
Yeah. It's
Serbia,
not Americans.
Luka Doncic, Wembanyama, Embiid, Giannis.
Yeah. It's
I
a
mean,
very international
keep going,
game.
right?
It's
I
a
mean,
very international
Jamal
game.
Murray's Canadian. I mean,
Yep.
you name it. It really has become a completely global game, and for America to be able to export one of its sports to the globe, that really hasn't happened. We've seen football, despite being as immense as in America, slowly and consistently gain traction. But basketball caught fire,
Yeah.
and now the whole world plays basketball.
There's
The
not a lot
whole
of
world.
there's not a lot of Americans starring in European soccer leagues.
No, but there are an awful lot of international basketball players starring in the
basketball.
NBA, and that's a remarkable moment for it. The Nuggets will get their playoffs. They got ahead of myself. They will get their preseason going on Friday in Abu Dhabi. You can catch both those games.
Foreshadowing.
On
We'll call that
NBA.
foreshadowing.
Maybe. I mean, that was the one that everyone thought we were going to get a couple of years ago. Your thoughts before we let you go, Doug, and the idea for the Nuggets in the offseason, they let Kentavious Caldwell-Pope go. I think he was a bigger part of this puzzle than you might think, obviously driven by the second apron of the cap, the same reason that Karl Anthony Towns got jettisoned when he did. It's not purely a basketball move. It's a cap move. Right now for Nuggets fans, that feels awful. For the majority of the Nuggets history, it would have felt great because we're trying to equalize the talent across the league. But they replace him basically with a Dario Saric, with Russell Westbrook. Hope it would have been Deron Holmes. Unfortunately, Holmes, who I think would have been a big piece of this puzzle, tears his Achilles in the very first summer league game. But minus that loss, and you look at the Nuggets right now after the loss of Holmes, the addition of Saric and Westbrook, how do you feel about their chances of being able to get back to at least the Western Conference Finals?
You know, I really think it comes down to Jamal Murray. I mean, if you can get a Jamal Murray that can stay healthy and stay focused and is not distracted by his contract, I think that means everything. Now, I think the next question is, did they do enough in the offseason or not do enough with the additions and the subtractions? I think Saric is actually going to be the biggest piece that no one's talking about.
Correct. Because he plays a lot like Jokic. Now, his health can sometimes be a concern too.
Yeah. But he can fill a lot of roles. He can fill a lot of minutes. I think that's the biggest addition that, like I said, is kind of quietly going under the radar because you bring in an all-star like Russell Westbrook. I mean, I think Westbrook could be really good for this team. I'll be really curious to watch this relationship with he and Jamal. I thought it was interesting media day. Russell Westbrook talking about what a great opportunity this is to teach somebody else who's arguably better than him right now.
Right now.
Yeah. I mean, not even arguably.
But I mean, let's be fair. I don't think Jamal Murray knows all the tricks that Russell Westbrook does.
No, I mean, Westbrook, if Jamal Murray goes into this season with the right mindset of I really can learn from this guy, I think look out. I mean, it could be a great 1-2 tandem. It could be an improved Jamal Murray.
I know the plan is to start Christian Brown.
Yeah.
And I look at that, and that's one of my only questions. And you and I can get into this a little bit more. Hopefully, I'll be back before the season starts. But call me crazy. Maybe out of left field here. I look at that spot and say, yeah, you need a defensive presence to replace KCP. You also need someone who can knock down shots. Well, that first part for Brown, yes. The second part for Brown, no. At least we haven't seen it yet. As strange as it sounds, I would rather start someone like Julian Strother, because he's going to be, whoever plays that position will be the 5th offensive option.
Yeah.
They're the last one. Now, KCP was cool with that. In Strother's case, he's long, he's lanky, he's not going to be a great one-on-one defender, but he can certainly stay in the way of guys, and he's looked to be a willing defender and can get better as he goes.
Right.
But he can knock down shots. And then I look at the idea of a bench unit that could be Westbrook, Brown, and Watson, and unleash them and run guys out of the gym at altitude. I'd almost rather see that than sort of miscasting Brown and then maybe miscasting Westbrook. And that, I just wonder where some of these pieces fall into place. It feels like Brown just got the ascension to the starting 2 because, well, he plays there and we don't really have another one.
And Michael Malone trusts him.
Right.
To some extent.
And
I think that's, we opened the show talking about Vance Joseph's flexibility, his ability to make changes on the fly within a game or within week to week.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be a lot of the other piece of this puzzle is can Michael Malone acquiesce to this idea that he doesn't have a perfect top 8
right
that are going to make minutes as they did when they won the championship. I think he is going to have to experiment, and maybe we will see that second team threesome that you just mentioned. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. We'll see how Christian Braun adapts to being a starter. We'll see if they truly lack that sort of knockdown shooter in the starting lineup. So I think that there's a lot of things that are sort of unsettled with this team outside of Nikola Jokic. You know what you're going to get.
Right.
But the pieces around him are going to look a little bit different. I mean, yeah, you have Jamal and you have Aaron Gordon, and I think both of those guys are going to do what they do. But I think their games are impacted by the other guys around. I mean, when you have a KCP, you couldn't leave him just wide open on the outside.
Right.
Can you do that if you're a defense with Christian Braun?
And Brown will have to prove that. And
yeah.
He's going to have to prove that himself. So it'll be up to Brown. And if he can't get it done, then maybe you have to look at Westbrook or somebody else and go small in the backcourt. We'll find out. It'll be the part you pointed out. It's Jamal Murray is really the key on the floor. I am curious to see what Michael Malone does as well, because I think more will be asked of Malone to coach this team this year with the expectations than even the team that ended up winning the whole thing. We'll find out more about it.
Yeah, I think it's a make or break year for Michael Malone because he did a great job the championship years. No doubt. You can never take that away.
No.
But I think
last year he ran the guys into the ground and it cost him. We know it.
I don't want to blame a coach for not winning a title. I mean, winning a title is a rare thing, but I don't think he helped his case.
Doug, in the NBA 2K video game, the new one that came out, the announcers in the game have pre-recorded lines with the Nuggets pointing out how this year they can't just run their starters that many big minutes and expect to be successful. And that's in like the video game version. So everyone knows that's a problem. So I'll have to find that out with Malone, and we'll find it out sooner rather than later. Obviously, make sure you check out Doug's really good article on Vance Joseph on Mile High Sports, and grab the latest Mile High Sports magazine while you're at it. It comes in 2 different flavors. You got either Deion Sanders or Bo Nix on the cover. You can find those all over town. And check everything out at milehighsports.com or the free Mile High Sports app. However you want to check us out, you can do so. Give Doug a follow on social for the latest as well. Always good to talk to you, my friend. Let's do this a little more often. Appreciate it.
For sure.
All right, Doug Ottewill, everyone joining us on Mile High Sports today. Want to let you know that if you are self-employed and you're having trouble getting a home loan or trying to refinance the loan that you have on your own home, well, look, it's understandable. It's hard when you're self-employed. There are a lot of hoops you have to jump through, and that's why you need to talk to SCL Mortgage. Over at SCL Mortgage, this is what they do. Help self-employed people get a home of their own or refinance their existing home loan. They've been doing it for 23 years. They know how to get it done with just your bank statement loan, no tax returns needed. All the challenges of being self-employed are the kind of things that SCL handles. Find them at myspecialmortgage.com or call 303-790-2222. That's 303-790-2222. It's been saying they've been serving Colorado successfully for more than 20 years. Please give them a call today or visit them at myspecialmortgage.com and MLS number 1200716. Thanks to Doug Ottewill for joining us. And now holding that seat is our Denver Broncos writer insider, Cody Roark. You can catch him, of course, all the post stories he's putting together over on Mile High Sports, and the host of the Locked On Broncos podcast. Cody, how's it going?
It's going. It's Is it Tuesday or Wednesday?
It is Tuesday. It is Tuesday.
I've been in front of a computer for the last couple of days doing the film breakdowns, which are now both film sessions, offense and defense, are fully up on Mile High Sports YouTube page. Check it out after this show here today. A lot. Like, there were a lot of plays to look at defensively. I texted Nate over the weekend during the game, the first half, and I said, hey, there may not be an offensive film review this week because nobody wants to watch this like that.
Yeah, not again.
But we ended up doing their second drive of the third quarter, 11 play, 87-yard, 92 if you factor in the false start penalty that happened there. Scoring drive that helped them win the game.
So
that was good.
The good one.
Yeah, there was the good.
Drive.
It was the good drive.
The
so
good drive. Okay.
there were some good things. We took from that, but obviously weather conditions are definitely a big factor. But the defense, man, I had fun. I always have fun breaking down the defense, but that
You're
was
a defensive
fun
guy.
That was a fun game.
Yeah,
So
and I'm a fan of the defensive side of the ball too, and I think I'll start there and look at particularly at the defensive backfield. You talked a little bit about it with Doug in the opening part of the show with talking about Vance Joseph, the idea that moving away from Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson now for Brandon Jones and PJ Locke. If you would have told somebody that training camp a year ago that this is what we'd be looking at today, people would have looked at you like you were out of your mind, right? Like, why would that happen? But here we are. And here we are with a defense that, quite frankly, looks better. That is no way to denigrate Jackson or Simmons, who has plenty left in the tank. But what they have back there in Surtain, Moss, and McMillan at the three starting corners.
yeah,
And there are three starting corners in today's NFL. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Nickel is the new base.
Right, exactly. And Jones and Locke at safety. This has really been an effective defensive backfield. 4 passes defensed, a sack, and 2 tackles for loss by the backfield on Sunday.
And you forced fumble and a recovered fumble as well. I mean, this was an impressive performance. And look, I think it's not just I think Denver's secondary has a great skill set to them at corner. I think at safety, they have a really good skill set that complements one another. But I think all of it's made possible even further by the front seven, the defensive line additions, the edge rushers, what they've been able to do. Just the system as well has been working out for Denver. I think the thing I like about Pat Surtain now, we talked about positional versatility in the offseason. The thing about Pat, Denver has so much confidence in their defensive backfield that they're like, you know what, Pat, you can move around and follow the number one receiver if that guy lines up in the slot. Because teams last year, when Denver wasn't able to do that, they would just motion their number one guy across, and Denver would either have to check to a zone or you couldn't follow him inside in between the numbers. Under Jim Leonard, it's now a huge thing that, hey, we got to be able to take away their best guys when they move inside the slot. And we saw a specific play. Garrett Wilson would line up in the slot a little bit later on in the game. Pat Surtain strapped him up, knocked a slant away there. There was one where Garrett Wilson motioned from one side of the field all the way to the other, caught it in the flat, and Pat Surtain tackled him for no gain on the play. That's the stuff you like to see. But then it allows Jaquan McMillan to play on the outside in certain situations. Riley Moss, I mean, look, I try to figure out what people are watching sometimes because I see so many responses that people are down on Riley Moss. What are you down for? The fact that, like, that first pass interference call, that was a terrible call. I hated that. And
I didn't like that call either.
And look, the Broncos defense, it was kind of like a ball don't lie moment. Denver got a goal line stand there on 3 straight plays. That was a ball don't lie moment for me, you know. And then the one late in the game against Mike Williams, like, Riley is trying to play the football and he's going against Mike Williams, who has always been a 60-40 jump ball guy. That was kind of 50-50. I mean, it is what it is. You can't play defense in today's NFL, even though Denver's doing it at a very high level. I am so thrilled. Like, watching Riley Moss gets me excited on tape because now you have a guy opposite of Pat Surtain who plays ultra aggressive, comes up and tackles, isn't afraid to do it, but he plays with a chip on his shoulder. He's fast. Like, he's got great mirror technique off the line of scrimmage, playing press coverage. You see that in my film breakdown that I dropped on the Mile High Sports YouTube page. I might be biased because I'm a former cornerback and, you know, a white cornerback at that. Played at a high level when I played. But watching this secondary play, they're humming. And look, I would even say, like, Jaquan McMillan having a great year, probably not being talked about enough.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think we're looking at Moss. Moss did have the 2 interference calls, and but some of that is
play aggressive.
Some of that's aggressive play. Some of that is also learning. You're going to learn the league. You're going to learn what they're going to let go. You're going to learn what they won't let go. And that takes experience. That means you're going to have to accept some flags. Now, the question I think people worry about it is they saw not that long ago, Damari Mathis looked really good when he first got a shot. It got through a couple of the penalties in the early going and then looked really good. And then by the second year, the league kind of had him figured out to the extent where he really is not going to start anymore. Now, in Moss's case, I think that's some of the concern. But I'm with you. I look at Moss and think that he has been outstanding. You know, you take what you will from Pro Football Focus. There's some value in what they do. It's one of the tools in the toolbox. But they have Riley Moss as the second best defender on the Broncos thus far this year, behind only Brandon Jones, who is at a 90, which is very, very silly. At the same time, they have Pat Surtain at 59.7 and Zach Allen as 19th on the Broncos defense with 54.5, which is ridiculous.
It just goes to show the nerds at PFF have no idea what they're doing. Like, and I'll say it, PFF, you guys are a bunch of nerds. Get a real job. But the thing that drives me nuts about all, like, they come up with these weird analytics. Like, here's the thing. I talk to players in the locker room almost every week. And the number one thing that we say is, like, you see a player get brought up in terms of, like, grades. Or, like, this guy does, like, these guys don't even know what my coach is telling me and my responsibility is. Or, like, for example, let's say a team comes out in a specific formation, right? You have a coverage called. Something in that formation changes. So maybe my role on this side of the field changes, but they stay the same in terms of coverage on the other side of the field. My coaching points and what I'm coached to do, who I'm supposed to cover now changes. And who, like, how do these guys know what my responsibility is? That, like, that's the number one thing. Like, you talk to coaches even say, like, these guys at PFF have no idea what they're looking at.
It's a lot harder to grade defense.
And how is it that these guys, because the NFL has a partnership with PFF. They'll get the film sent to them directly into a huddle file, and all of a sudden they have a little database they go through literally hours after the game and come out with grades. Like, to me, ridiculous. The coaches don't even have that, timeliness in terms of that. So it's like, that's the thing. Like, people are like, oh, PFF grade. Try bringing that up in a contract negotiation with the general manager. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Nerds.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tool in the toolbox. You know, it doesn't solve everything. It's one of the things that can be helpful, but it doesn't solve everything, to be sure. But in Moss's case, yeah, I think he's been really, really good. And the front seven's been impactful too. And we should talk about that because they lost Alex Singleton for the year.
Yeah.
Justin Sternad gets his first start since 2021, first defensive snap since 2021. Yeah. But in truth, it is Cody Barton whose snap count went up and is kind of the guy that is going to take over that role. First game, 10 tackles, tied with PJ Locke for the tops on the team. I talked about this after the injury. I said, look, this is no denigration of Alex Singleton. If Cody Barton was better than Alex Singleton, he would have started over Alex Singleton. That's just how it works in sports. But the drop-off, truthfully, because of the nature of the position and the way it's played right now, and the fact that Barton is a skilled veteran that knows what he's doing, the drop-off there is probably not going to be that severe for the Broncos. And I think you saw it in this game.
Yeah, well, and even like Sean Payton told us Monday, we were on a conference call with him, and he said Cody's role really hasn't changed. He said really Justin was the one who started, took over Alex's role, but the only difference is that Cody's got the green dot. He's going to be the guy that's calling it. I mean, I came away very impressed. Like, the first play of the game, for Justin Sternad, it's kind of like, wait, is this real type of moment? Because you're coming on a stunt, and all of a sudden you just have this wide open path to Aaron Rodgers. Right. Like, wait a minute, I'm about to sack Aaron Rodgers, and he does it. I love that for Justin. Justin, obviously, one of the players I've grown close with over the years here. I've watched him kind of emerge a little bit. Missed his rookie season because he had a little bit of a freak ligament injury in his hand.
Yeah.
And that held him out there. There were high expectations for him inside of a Vic Fangio, Ed Donatel defense, but he's been one of their best special teams players since he's been a Bronco. And I think, like, player development wise, Justin has grown so much from, his first stepping foot on the NFL field to now. I think the benefit, he's been in Vance Joseph's system for the second year, even though he hadn't gotten any, live game reps in the regular season. I go back to this. I'm not surprised because I watched him in the preseason. I came away. I was very impressed with how Sternad played in the preseason, but we didn't know going into this game who was going to start at linebacker. We thought, okay, hey, they go out and they sign Quan Alexander to the practice squad, veteran Zach Cunningham.
Probably not that first game.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have done that either, but it's like, all right, you have a guy like Lavelle Bailey, who's also been here as well. So you got 3 inside linebackers, but Christian Welch. At first I thought it was going to be Christian Welch and Barton, but it ended up being Sternad and Barton. I like that. Welch gets only a couple of defensive reps, and in those reps he made it count because he stopped Breece Hall on the goal line on one of those plays on second down.
Only three defensive snaps. Yeah, so and one of them, obviously, with that performance, Sternad.
I think it's just a good fit. Yeah. The system defensively, these guys at every level. They're just playing with confidence. And look, I like how Vance is disguising a lot, not showing it pre-snap. So it's like, a guy like Rodgers, who's hard to sack, Sean.
Yeah, he is.
And all of a sudden now he's getting sacked 5 times. And, on that one play, I know you were talking with Doug earlier about the PJ Lock blitz. Like,
Right.
PJ showing that he's coming. Now,
Yeah.
often at times, Rodgers might be like, all right, he's showing it, but he's just going to drop back into coverage. Whereas you're looking at Jaquan McMillan, you're reading, okay, Jaquan's going to blitz. And ideally, as quarterbacks, you're always coached to throw against the blitz, right? And so he's trying to do that. And then PJ just comes backside, blows him up. I love Denver's defensive look. They send numbers when it matters, and they're not showing it, and it's getting home. That's a good sign.
That part's been really valuable. 5 guys with the was on for every snap on the defense. Surtain, Locke, Brandon Jones, as you would imagine, Zach Allen, and Cody Barton. So the basically Barton. I get what Sean Payton's saying, but Barton essentially takes Singleton's job and Sternad takes Barton's job. And who knows if Sternad can hold it? That's great. If you can't, you have options in Bailey. You have Quan Alexander who's played, but given the performance you saw here, there's no reason to think that you wouldn't go with it, because obviously it worked pretty well. They'll get their next chance against the Raiders, and all of a sudden at 2-2 with the Raiders 2-2 and the Chargers 2-2. The next 2 opponents, the Broncos, have an early opportunity to make a statement in the AFC West. We'll talk about the offensive side, as Cody pointed out. They had a drive. They had one good drive. A win's a win. It's easier to look at it when you've won, but we'll take a look at that in a moment. I want to remind you that the baseball playoffs are going. The football season in full swing. And online sports betting for 4 years now, you've heard all of the ads, and that it can be overwhelming, and looking at all the different ways to pick out. If you wanted to get into the fun of sports betting, what would you do? Well, we're going to try to add to that for you, but we're trying to add to it, not in one of those other things you have to catalog. Trying to simplify it, because My Life Sports has gathered all of the best sign-up offers and bonuses from all of the books, and we've put them all on one page on our website, making it easy for folks who are interested in betting to find the best options. We've researched them all, brought them all together in a way that makes it simple to make it know what's all available out there. Bonus bets, second chance bets, deposit matches. Not all of these things are the best for everybody, but one of them might be best for you. So you can go look at them all in one spot, everything in one place. Visit mylifesports.com today, or download our mobile app and then click on Colorado Sports Betting. It's that simple. That's our bonus to you from Mile High Sports. Cody, the Broncos offense was underwhelming. We know that a lot of this was weather related. Look, when Aaron Rodgers can't hold on to the football, I can't get too mad about Bo Nix not holding on to the football. But as you pointed out, one good drive all game. If the Broncos lose this game, let's say Zuerlein hits that field goal at the end of the game. There's no question we're talking about how bad the Broncos offense is. What is going on with it? Why does it look as disjointed as the defense does look connected?
Well, I think the offense, you have a lot of new pieces. You have a new right tackle who is playing really good football right now.
He really is.
And Alex Palczewski. You're going through different personnel looks in terms of wide receiver rotation, getting different guys reps. You're trying to get the run game going. That has been a little bit of a struggle. It got going in the second half, which was, to me, probably one of the more promising developments of the offensive side of the ball in Sunday's game. I thought that the scheme, I thought it was blocked really well. We'll talk about Greg Dulcich on the film review. There was one play. Look, it was that drive that we're talking about specifically. It was an 11-play drive. Jaleel McLaughlin, the first 2 plays. One, he rattles off a 6-yard run. The second one, he rattles off a 7-yard run. Now we have a 3rd and 2 situation. Javonte comes in, and he gets the handoff, but you got Greg Dulcich coming backside because the Broncos, they're down blocking. They're leaving the defensive end wide open to try to come down, because Greg Dulcich is supposed to come and kick him out. He misses. He attacks the wrong shoulder. Javonte still gets the first down, luckily. But then you started getting more rhythm there. 35 of Javonte's 77 rush yards in this game came on that drive specifically. And then obviously we saw Bo Nix delivering that 3rd and 11 dagger shot there to Cortland Sutton. That was a great throw. Bo's best throw of the game. And then you go on, you cap it off with the touchdown there, obviously, to Cortland Sutton. So much I've seen the commentary this week on social media. It's like, oh, Bo only threw for this amount of yards, or he had -7 yards at halftime. Yeah, that's not pretty, right? It's not ideal.
It's not.
It's ugly. Absolutely. But I also want people to put it into context. We saw in the first half, I'll applaud it. Sean Payton, they took a couple of shots downfield. A couple of shots were close. There were a couple overthrows there, but it was a torrential downpour in which, if you didn't watch Pat McAfee's show here today, Aaron Rodgers himself had even come out and said, it was very difficult for him to grip the football. Rodgers has been playing the league for quite some time, future Hall of Famer. But you also look at maybe the game, the play calling. Denver's defense gets the turnover, right? They have a couple of plays. And then I didn't like that third down play where you're trying to throw a quick screen there. Like you don't run the ball. Like you're not trying to run the ball there. Like you're taking shots. I understand you want to try to get Bo going. But then third and however, you throw it a little sidearm screen. Greg Dulcich misses a block on DJ Reed. Now you lose 4 yards on that play. Tyler Bidet catches a screen play out of the backfield, which I was thinking in my head, why are you running a screen pass in a torrential downpour? With the way that the defense is also trying to play you, you lose 3 yards on that. It's a fumble. Now you turn the ball. Okay, minus 7 yards. A lot of Denver's offensive passing game from that point wasn't vertical. It was more so horizontal. Hey, we're going to try to throw it out quick to try to get something yards after the catch. And that's what led to Bo's negative stat line at halftime there. And certainly people are like, well, he played in Eugene, Oregon. He should be used to the rain. I can tell you this, having lived in Oregon, having lived in Eugene, and watching Bo in the last 2 years, the Ducks, they didn't have a lot of rain games, even at Autzen. Even though it rains a lot in Oregon, even the rain in Eugene is a little bit of a drizzle. It's not a torrential downpour. I think also people are also like, oh, well, he's having a hard time trying to grip the football. Aaron Rodgers expressed that he had the same issue. College footballs are a little bit smaller than the NFL ball as well, which I don't think most people even know that. So I'm looking at this game and it's like, yeah, like it was an ugly statistical production. He finishes with 60 yards passing. I'm not saying, okay, wow, he's not it. Like, I think it's an overreaction here. Just a week after what we saw him do against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers,
the ball
lit up the Eagles this past week as well.
In his hands, I'm not worried about that because once I saw Rodgers having trouble, like, well, okay, you're off the hook. Aaron Rodgers has been there and done that for all of it. And if he couldn't hold on to it, then nobody's going to be able to hold on to it.
People are like, why don't you put a glove on? Like, I don't know if you realize this, people. Putting a glove on is the worst thing that you can actually do.
If you've also never worn one of those things, by the way, it basically turns you into Spider-Man. You could like stick to the walls and climb up the walls with those things. They are crazy. So actually getting it to let go of the ball and spin it is really, really tricky. And you certainly wouldn't want to do it for the first time ever in a game. That's
even with that too, like in water, like the gloves are actually a little bit more slick when it comes to like holding a rubber football because you're trying to hold on to it. It's great. Everyone takes off their gloves. Like Breece Hall took his gloves off. Garrett Wilson, a lot of the wide receivers for the Jets took their gloves off. Denver receivers took their gloves off because it's wet and it's like it's hard to catch a football, in those in those type of conditions. So the idea, it's like, hey, you don't want to actually put a glove on in this situation in the rain because I can tell you this, like, it's not fun. It's not easy. You have more drop passes. It's harder to catch and to grip a football if the football's wet as the football was in New York. Now, let's say it's like a slight drizzle, right? Or like a mist in a sense, you're probably fine with wearing gloves. But I think in the conditions you saw in New York, it was brutal coming down pregame.
The nerds were right, by the way. Sometimes they get it right over at PFF. You go look at the Broncos grades and run blocking from the offensive players. 20 players, or 19 players graded. Pardon me. Greg Dulcich graded out last with a 37.9 on the 100-point scale. So sometimes they
see. I always try to tell people
they get it right.
I always try to tell people just use your eyes. Like I think, trying to throw a grade at people, like if you watch, you can just see like, why is Greg Dulcich blocking? Like the tight end room right now, Nate Atkins and Adam Troutman, they're doing a terrific job in the blocking department. When it comes to the receiving department, Denver, I mean, they don't have anything. There's no element. There's no production from tight end.
Zero.
So could there be some changes coming to that room in terms of what it looks like? Possibly.
Donald Parham Jr.'s on the practice
squad. Why not? Game day elevation and try something different.
Absolutely what I
Lucas
would do.
Kroll, maybe activate him for a game and see what you got. Greg Dulcich right now, I think, is a little bit more of a decoy offensively. When he was targeted in the passing game, he had a couple of drops against the Steelers. That you want to try to give a guy another chance, but Denver, they're not finding ways to get the tight end position involved right now. It's a little bit
there's
concerning.
not a lot of talent there, but that leads back to the idea I wanted to ask you about the Bo Nix thing. And I get it. A lot of these passes were short, line of scrimmage or behind. He threw a lot of those at Oregon too.
Yeah.
But this is a Sean Payton thing as well, because every one of these games,
it was a different play calling design that we saw week 3 for sure. Entirely different.
Right. Well, and hopefully we'll see more of that, because seeing it revert was really fascinating to me. And granted, they got a better running performance. That was really, really important. I see Javonte Williams look a little bit like his old self again in the rain. But I do wonder at a certain point, we've seen 3 games where Sean Payton is just having Bo Nix horizontal. We've seen 1 game where we saw him push it down the field.
I don't understand it.
Is there any reason to believe that Sean Payton's offense is the one he's called only 25% of the time?
I feel like it's the true offense is the one we saw against Tampa Bay, like what it should be, right? But then it's like, why regress a little bit? I
Payton's
understand.
making those calls.
Yeah, and
If he makes
that's
the
the
calls and
duality.
Nix can't complete it, that's on Nix and his receivers, right? But Payton's not calling the plays.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything too. Like I think circumstantially, like understanding, okay, hey, the weather conditions. Ideally, you know what most teams do in the rain? They run the football,
Well, you run,
right? But
right.
Denver, obviously, to that point, has not had an
They
existent.
did call
run game.
still far more passes than runs in the first half.
15 pass attempts to 10 rushing
even though
attempts
it was
there.
no further than a 3-point game.
And they should have just ran the football like
Yep.
early on. And I think a lot of that, the issue was, Sean, a lot of the early downs primarily were passing plays, like first, second down, and now you face a third and long. Like you don't want to run it on third down unless you're just going to say, hey, we'll do a draw. Like, you see most people do. I would have preferred that than the little toss out quick screenplay to Troy Franklin. And that's not a Troy Franklin. That's just like, hey, it wasn't blocked well by Dulcich.
Well, wasn't going to go anywhere.
The Jets defense played it ultra aggressive. And look, they even played a lot of zone coverage against Denver here this week. And look, I think in those conditions, I think everything benefited the Jets defensively, and Denver still found a way in that third quarter to make some hay and come away with the only touchdown of the game for both sides, which is promising.
Yep.
But yeah, you want to see the offensive play calling. You want to see the design of it look drastically different than what we saw this past week. And I think in the first couple of weeks, you've played some really good defenses. The Raiders, they're very good at their pass rush. If Max Crosby's able to come back this week, he's been a little bit of a
you don't have to tell Broncos fans about Max
everyone
Crosby.
knows where number 98 is. The Raiders in an interesting spot this week because there seems to be a lot of turmoil, which is weird. They're 2-2.
Devontae Adams apparently hasn't spoken to Antonio Pierce since Antonio Pierce liked
we just saw
on Instagram
there was a report.
There
was a report that came out today that now the Raiders are exploring calling.
Well, they should have been doing that all along if they hadn't really been quietly. But now it's more overt than covert.
Devontae Adams ended up on the Kay Adams show today, and it was kind of like they were talking about what Aaron Rodgers said about the Jets and the cadence and things like that. And I was like, oh, like Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams are already they're gonna run Robert Saleh. Like if he gets traded there, Robert Saleh. You're on borrowed time there because that's Aaron Rodgers' team. It's not Robert Saleh's team anymore.
Right. And there have been discussions that after the injury to Rashee Rice, the idea that, the Raiders and the Chargers, Chiefs can make a deal.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen.
This isn't Madden.
Yeah.
Who's going to trade to a division rival, especially a player of the caliber of Devontae Adams?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. The Jets, you can see that because no one's going to give up more than New York because that's where he wants to go. And that makes a lot of sense. But it'll be interesting for the Broncos this week. We'll find out maybe will the real Broncos offense stand up in the last 2 weeks? They've gotten 2 wins. These are easy lessons to discuss when you've gotten the win rather than the loss. You can go check Jets radio for more of that. It's apoplectic up there. It's amazing what 2-2 looks like based on expectations, isn't it?
Yeah. I feel like from the season, I felt like Denver was going to beat Seattle and Pittsburgh, and I felt like these 2 games on the road before the season, I felt like we're going to be.
I thought the same thing. I thought if they had 2 wins, it would have been the opposite of what they got. But also worth noting, the 2 losses have both been by 1 score.
And playoff teams that I think I know the Steelers are coming off of a loss. That defense is
still their
legit,
only loss.
But man, the NFL is getting very interesting.
It is interesting, and it is, quite frankly, this week especially been sloppy. Sloppy can win games too. So if you're going to be sloppy, at least come out with the win. The Broncos did. We'll find out what they do. It is Raiders week, and hey, that actually means something for a change. It's been a while, so nice to have Cody Roark joining us. Of course, check out the film studies that Cody has up on our YouTube channel on Mile High Sports. You can check out more on milehighsports.com or on the free app. But of course, you can catch him on the Locked On Broncos podcast as well. Always good to talk to you. Thanks so much. Thanks to Doug Ottewill for joining us earlier, talking a little bit about Vance Joseph and the Denver Nuggets. They will get their preseason going on Friday. They have left for the UAE, where they will play the Celtics in Dubai. We'll talk a little bit more about that as they come along. The Avalanche have their final preseason home game tonight as well. So hockey season coming along. It's October's here. All of the sports get going. It's a great time to be a sports fan. So where else would you want to be? For Cody Roark, for Doug Ottewill, for Danny Bailey in the booth who makes every single thing work, I'm Sean Drotar. You are in the right spot. Live, local, independent for almost 25 years. This is Mile High Sports.